I thought helping her family would make her love me more. Instead, it made me disposable. I cleared her father's debt, hundreds of thousands of baht, because she said she couldn't sleep knowing her parents might lose their home. The night I sent the money, she cried in my arms and whispered, "Now you're part of my family forever." 2 months later, she told me she never loved a foreigner, not even me. I came to Thailand looking for peace. I found a lesson I'll never forget. This is my confession. A few nights ago, I got an email from someone who's been following this channel for a few months now, not long, but long enough to understand the kind of heartbreak we talk about here. He said my stories reminded him of his own time in Chiang Rai, where he'd done the same thing, paid off a family's debt, believing it would buy love, or at least gratitude. Instead, it bought distance, silence, and eventually, goodbye. When I read his message, I felt that same old ache come back. Not anger, just that quiet sting of realization that good intentions don't always lead to good endings. For a moment, I just sat there, thinking how many of us out here are trying to fix someone else's life while ours slowly falls apart in the background. That's what makes this channel special to me. It's not about bitterness, it's about truth. It's about men who gave too much, trusted too deeply, and still have the courage to tell their stories. Before I begin tonight's story, I just want to say thank you to everyone watching, commenting, and sharing where you're from. Your words mean more than you know. Whether you've been here for months or just stumbled across this video tonight, you're part of something real. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. This is what happened when I confused kindness with love and generosity with belonging. This is the story of how I lost nearly everything, trying to save someone who never asked to be saved. I suppose I should start at the beginning, though even now, sitting here 3 years later in a quiet guest house room in Bangkok, the humidity pressing against the windows like a living thing, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when I stopped being Colin Mercer, retired English literature teacher from Bristol, and became just another lonely farang with too much heart and too little sense. The transformation didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like watching the tide come in, where you don't notice the water rising until suddenly your feet are wet and you realize you're standing in something deeper than you'd planned. My wife Margaret died in April of 2019. Cancer took her slowly, methodically, room by room, organ by organ, until our little flat on Gloucester Road felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum filled with her absence. I taught English literature for 40 years at Redland Green School, watched thousands of students pass through my classroom, helped hundreds of them understand Dickens and Shakespeare and Wordsworth. But none of those decades of experience prepared me for the silence that followed her funeral. My daughter Emma lives in Edinburgh with her husband and 2 children. She called every Sunday afternoon, dutiful as clockwork, punctual as a metronome, but I could hear the relief in her voice, thin as tissue paper, when I told her I was thinking of traveling. "You deserve it, Dad," she'd said, her words coming through the phone line with practiced brightness. "Mum would want you to live a little. She always said you needed adventure, so I sold the flat, the one Margaret and I had bought in 1983, when property was still affordable and the neighborhood still had corner shops instead of artisan coffee houses. I packed 2 suitcases, donated most of our furniture to charity, and booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok. I told myself it was about the warm weather, about stretching my pension further, about the low cost of living, and the chance to experience something different in whatever years I had left. But really, if I'm being honest, I was running from the ghost of everything I'd lost, from the empty chair at the breakfast table and the silence that filled every room like smoke. Bangkok hit me like a wall the moment I stepped off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport. It wasn't just the heat, though that was intense enough, pressing down on my shoulders like a wet blanket, making my shirt stick to my back within seconds. It was everything: the noise, the chaos, the sheer overwhelming aliveness of it all. Traffic moved like a living organism, scooters weaving between cars with inches to spare, tuk-tuks belching exhaust into air, already thick with humidity and the smell of street food, and something floral I couldn't identify. Jasmine, maybe, or orchids. I'd traveled before. School trips to Paris, a 10th anniversary holiday to Barcelona, but nothing like this. Nothing that made me feel so completely foreign, so obviously out of place. I rented a small studio apartment in the Sukhumvit area. Nothing fancy, just a room really, with a bed pushed against one wall and a tiny kitchenette with a hot plate and a sink the size of a mixing bowl. The window looked out onto a swai, one of those narrow side streets that branch off the main roads like capillaries, packed with vendors selling grilled chicken and sticky rice and somtam from carts that looked like they'd been there since before I was born. The first week, I barely left a 3-block radius. I'd wake at dawn, my body still on British time, my mind foggy with jet lag, and I'd wander the neighborhood like a ghost, buying mango sticky rice from a woman with gold teeth who laughed every time I tried to pronounce Khao Niao Mamuang, and getting lost in the maze of alleys that all looked identical. I smiled at everyone I passed, shopkeepers and street cleaners and old men sitting on plastic stools drinking coffee, and most of them smiled back. It felt like kindness, and God, I was starving for kindness, for any acknowledgement that I existed, that I wasn't just invisible. It was my second week in the city when I met her, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was standing at an ATM near the Phrom Phong BTS station, fumbling with my bank card, trying to remember if I needed to press the green button or the red button or the yellow one that said something in Thai I couldn't read. The machine beeped at me, angry and insistent, and I felt my face go hot with embarrassment as the people behind me in line began to shift impatiently. Then a voice behind me said, soft and clear, "Excuse me, sir. Do you need help with the machine?" I turned around and saw her for the first time, Thanika Boonsri, though I didn't know her name yet. She was young, maybe late 20s, dressed in a crisp white blouse, tucked into a dark blue skirt, professional and neat, her hair pulled back into a low ponytail that showed the elegant line of her neck. She had one of those faces that seemed to smile even in repose, soft around the edges, with eyes that crinkled kindly at the corners when she spoke. There was a small mole just above her left eyebrow, and I found myself focusing on it, this tiny detail, because looking directly into her eyes felt too intense. "I'm terribly sorry," I said, stepping aside quickly, nearly tripping over my own feet. "I'm still getting used to these machines. They're different from the ones back home." She laughed, not mockingly, just a light sound that somehow made me feel less foolish. "It's okay, sir. Many people have trouble." "You are visitor here?" I nodded. "Retired teacher from England. Bristol. Just moved here, actually. Or trying to, anyway." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, you move here? Not just holiday?" I shrugged. Seemed like the right time for a change. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and my daughter has her own life in Scotland, and I just thought, why not? Why was I telling this complete stranger my life story? But something about her expression, attentive and unjudging, made the words spill out. She stepped forward, gently moving me aside, and pressed a sequence of buttons on the ATM with practiced efficiency. "You press green first, then insert your card like this, then type your PIN, then choose amount." She guided me through each step patiently, her voice steady and kind, and when the machine finally spat out my cash, I felt absurdly triumphant. "Thank you so much," I said, clutching the bills like they were precious. "You're very kind." She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "You are English, yes? Your accent is very clear." I nodded, guilty as charged. "And you speak English beautifully, if you don't mind my saying so." She smiled, a deeper smile this time that reached her eyes. "I work at bank near here. I practice English every day with customers. My name is Thanika, but you can call me Nika if it's easier." She offered her hand, small and cool in mine, and I shook it. "Colin," I said. "Colin Mercer. And I'll try to remember Thanika. It's a beautiful name." She laughed again. Thank you, Mr. Colin. If you need help with bank things or anything in Bangkok, you can come to my branch. We are just there, near the BTS. She pointed vaguely down the street. I am happy to help. And then, with another smile, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of commuters and shoppers, like she'd never been there at all. I didn't expect to see her again, but 2 days later, I was buying coffee at a small family-run shop near my apartment, the kind of place where the menu was only in Thai and you ordered by pointing at pictures, when she walked in. Mr. Colin, she called out, her face lighting up with genuine surprise, or what looked like genuine surprise. Looking back now, I wonder how much of it was calculated, how much was theater. But in that moment, it felt like fate, like serendipity, like the universe was throwing me a lifeline. She waved and crossed the small shop to my table, and without asking, she sat down across from me. You live near here? She asked. I nodded. Just around the corner. Small studio apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's enough. She smiled. Good. This area is nice. Not too expensive. Not too quiet. Do you like Bangkok so far? We talked for nearly an hour, our coffees growing cold, the afternoon heat building outside until the air conditioning in the shop couldn't quite keep up. She told me about herself in carefully measured doses. She'd grown up in Nakhon Ratchasima, a city I'd never heard of, usually called Korat by locals. It's in Isan, she explained, the northeast of Thailand. Very different from Bangkok. More traditional, more simple. She'd moved to the city 5 years ago for work, started as a clerk at a small bank branch and worked her way up to a position that sounded vaguely managerial, though she was modest about it. It's nothing special, she said, but I am happy. I send money home to my family every month. It's my duty as daughter. There was something in the way she said duty, a weight that pressed down on the word that made me admire her immediately. She asked about me, and I found myself telling her more than I'd planned, more than I'd told anyone since Margaret died. About the teaching, the 40 years of teenagers and lesson plans and staff meetings. About Margaret, how we'd met at university, married young, never had any great adventures but had been happy in our small, predictable life. About the cancer, the treatments that didn't work, the hospice, the funeral with too many flowers and not enough words. She listened without interrupting, her face soft with concentration, and when I finished, she reached across the table and patted my hand gently. You are good, man, Mr. Colin, she said quietly. I can tell. Your wife was very lucky. It was such a simple gesture, her hand on mine for just a moment, but it cracked something open inside me, some sealed compartment I'd been keeping locked tight. I felt tears prick my eyes and had to look away, embarrassed. We started meeting regularly after that, falling into a rhythm that felt natural and unforced. She'd text me after work, her messages always polite and carefully punctuated. Hello, Mr. Colin, do you have time for coffee today? Or, I am free this evening if you want to have dinner? I always said yes, always. She called our meetings her English practice, laughing as she said it, though her English was already quite good, better than she let on. You are teacher, she'd say, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You can help me sound more smart, more professional for work. We'd sit in small restaurants tucked into side streets, places I never would have found on my own, and she'd ask me about British idioms, about the difference between shall and will, about how to pronounce words like schedule and laboratory that seemed designed to trip up non-native speakers. I found myself looking forward to those evenings more than I wanted to admit, more than was probably healthy. She had a way of making me feel useful again, like I wasn't just an old man killing time in a foreign country, waiting for life to run out. I was teaching again, helping someone, making a difference, however small. One night, we walked through Lumpini Park after dinner, the air finally cooling as the sun set behind the towers of the business district, and she said, You are different from other farang I meet, Mr. Colin. You don't look at me like they do. You don't make me feel small. You listen. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled and said something inane about how listening was part of being a good teacher. But inside, I felt something shift, something dangerous and hopeful. It was the first time I'd felt anything like attraction since Margaret died, and it terrified me. By the end of the first month, we were seeing each other almost every weekend, and some weeknights too. She took me to markets I'd never have found on my own, taught me how to bargain for mangoes and dragon fruit, introducing me to her friends from the bank, young women in sharp business clothes who giggled and spoke rapid Thai when they thought I wasn't paying attention. They teased Thanika mercilessly. I could tell from her blushing and the way she swatted at them, and once I asked what they were saying. They say you are my teacher, like in movie. She translated, laughing. Like Pretty Woman, but I am not Julia Roberts, and you are not Richard Gere. She seemed embarrassed, but she never corrected them, never said we were just friends or that I was simply helping her with English. I noticed that. Looking back, I should have asked why. One Saturday evening, we sat by the lake in Lumpini Park, watching the monitor lizards sun themselves on the banks, prehistoric and strange, and she rested her head on my shoulder. The gesture was so casual, so easy, like she'd done it 100 times before. You make me feel safe, Mr. Colin, she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the sound of joggers passing and children playing nearby. My heart did something complicated in my chest, a painful squeeze that felt like hope and fear mixed together. I wanted to ask what she meant, if this was more than friendship, if she felt even a fraction of what I was starting to feel. But I was terrified of breaking whatever fragile thing we'd built, terrified of being the creepy old man who misread kindness for something more. So I just put my arm around her shoulders and said, "You make me feel less alone, Thanika. Thank you for that." She looked up at me then, her face so close I could count her eyelashes, and for a long moment I thought she might kiss me. My stomach fluttered like I was 16 again, but instead she smiled, soft and private, and said, "Good. We help each other. That is what friends do." Friends, the word, should have disappointed me, but somehow it didn't. It felt like a beginning. It was another 2 weeks before she invited me to visit her family home in Nakhon Ratchasima. "My mother and father want to meet you," she said one night over dinner, spinning her fork nervously in her pad thai. "They hear I have farang friend who is teacher, and they want to see if you are real person or if I am making up story." She laughed, but there was nervousness underneath it, a tension in her shoulders. "You don't have to come if it's too far. Korat is maybe 4 hours by bus, and my home is very simple, not like Bangkok. We don't have shopping mall or fancy restaurant." 4 hours felt like nothing. I would have traveled 4 days if she'd asked, would have taken a boat to the moon if it meant being near her. I'd be honored, I told her, and I meant it with every atom of my being. "I'd love to meet your family." Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen before, unguarded and genuinely happy, all the careful politeness dropping away for a moment. "Really? You are sure? Okay, I will tell my mother. She will cook so much food, you will be too full to move. She always do this when guests come." The thought of meeting her family filled me with a strange blend of excitement and terror. I was 66 years old, a retired teacher from England who'd been married for 40 years, and I was about to visit a Thai village to meet the parents of a woman I was, what exactly? Dating? Courting? The words felt absurd, rattling around in my head, too young and presumptuous for what we were, but I couldn't think of better ones. All I knew was that I wanted to be wherever she was, and if that meant traveling to a small town I'd never heard of to meet people I couldn't speak to, then that's what I would do. The bus ride to Nakhon Ratchasima on a Saturday morning was long and uncomfortable, the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the heat. But Thanika chatted the entire way, pointing out landmarks through the smudged window, telling me stories about growing up in the countryside. "My father grow rice his whole life," she said, her grammar slipping slightly as it often did when she was excited or tired. "Very hard work, Mr. Colin. Every year, We pray for good rain. If rain don't come, crop fail. If rain come too much, crop also fail. Farmer life is very difficult. I listened, piecing together a picture of a childhood I could barely imagine. Poverty I'd never experienced. A kind of precariousness that made my own upbringing in suburban Bristol look like luxury. Is it hard for them now? I asked. She nodded slowly. Always hard. Every year, little bit harder. Costs go up, prices go down. But they don't complain. Thai people don't complain. There was something in her voice then, a tightness, but before I could ask about it, she brightened and pointed out the window. Look, mister. Colin, we are almost there. See the temple? Very famous in Korat. When we finally pulled into the bus station, her parents were waiting outside, standing beside a beat-up motorbike, and my first thought was how small they looked, how weathered. Her father was a thin man with skin darkened by decades of sun, deep lines around his eyes, wearing faded jeans and a polo shirt that had seen better days. Her mother was rounder, softer, with gray streaking through her black hair and a smile that transformed her entire face. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward and grabbed my hands, speaking in rapid Thai that I couldn't begin to follow. She say you are very handsome, Thanika translated, laughing as her mother continued her enthusiastic speech. She say she is so happy I have good friend from England. She say she worry about me in Bangkok, alone, with no family. I felt my face heat with embarrassment and pleasure. Tell her I'm honored to meet her, I said. Thanika translated, and her mother beamed even wider, if that was possible. I'd brought gifts, flowers for her mother, and a bottle of decent whiskey for her father, purchases Thanika had advised me on, and the way they received them, with both hands and small bows, made me feel like I'd done something right for the first time in months. The house was small and simple, exactly as Thanika had described it, sitting at the edge of the village, where the neat rows of homes gave way to rice fields that stretched toward the horizon. It was raised on stilts, traditional Thai style, with wooden walls and a corrugated metal roof that probably turned the place into an oven during the hottest parts of the day. But inside, it was clean and welcoming, with a concrete floor swept spotless and a small altar in the corner where incense burned in front of faded photographs of ancestors I'd never know. Within minutes, I was seated at a low table while her mother brought out dish after dish, more food than 4 people could possibly eat. Rice, of course, and som tam so spicy it made my eyes water. Grilled chicken on wooden skewers, a fish curry that was unlike anything I'd eaten in Bangkok, intense and fragrant. Her father poured me a glass of Mekong whiskey, the cheap local stuff that burned going down but warmed pleasantly in the stomach, and we toasted. He spoke in Thai, his voice rough but kind, and Thanika translated, her hand on my arm. He say, thank you for taking care of his daughter in Bangkok. He worry about her there, alone in big city with bad people. He say he is grateful you are good, man. I felt a lump form in my throat and had to swallow hard before I could respond. She takes care of me more than I take care of her, I said, looking at Thanika. I'm the lucky one. When she translated, her father nodded approvingly and poured me another drink, smaller this time, and clapped me on the shoulder. That evening, after the sun had set and the oppressive heat had lifted slightly, I helped him repair a section of the kitchen roof that had started to leak during the last monsoon. He didn't speak English beyond hello and thank you, and my Thai was non-existent, but we communicated through gestures and shared effort, passing tools and holding boards steady while the other hammered. When we finished, the stars were out, impossibly bright without the light pollution of the city, and he stood beside me, wiping sweat from his forehead, and said something long and serious. Thanika, who'd been watching from the doorway, smiled. He say you are good man, not lazy like city people. He say he is happy I found friend like you. I'd never felt more accepted, more welcomed, in my entire life. These people knew nothing about me, Nothing about my past or my pension or what I could offer them, and they'd open their home and their hearts without hesitation. It felt like family. It felt like belonging. Over the next 2 days, I fell in love with the rhythm of rural life in a way I hadn't expected. We woke early, before the heat became unbearable, and I'd walk with Thanica through the rice fields, the green stretching out endlessly under a pale morning sky, farmers already at work in their paddies, bent double in the water. She introduced me to neighbors, old women who giggled behind their hands at my clumsy Y greeting, children who stared wide-eyed at my height and my pale skin like I was some kind of mythical creature. One little boy, maybe 5 or 6, reached out and touched my arm, then ran away, shrieking with laughter. He never see farang before, Thanica explained, laughing herself. He think maybe you are ghost. I spent an afternoon sitting with her father and his friends, all of them farmers, drinking warm beer and communicating through smiles and gestures since none of them spoke English. They were curious about England, about the weather there, it rains all the time, yes, and about why I'd come to Thailand. For peace, I said through Thanica, and they nodded like they understood completely. One afternoon, we sat on the porch, the same porch where I'd later have my heart broken, and her mother brought out tea, sweet and cold. She spoke to Thanica in Thai, a long speech with frequent glances in my direction, and Thanica's cheeks flushed pink as she listened. When her mother finished, Thanica turned to me, looking almost shy. She say you are like family now. She say she is happy I found someone who is kind and who make me smile. She say, before you, I never smile when I call home. I didn't know what to say. The words sat in my chest, too big to fit through my throat. Your family is wonderful, I finally managed. Thank you for bringing me here, Thanica. This means more to me than you know. She reached over and took my hand, her fingers small and warm in mine, and for a long moment we just sat there, her mother humming in the kitchen, the sound of chickens clucking in the yard, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. I am happy you come, Mr. Colin, she said softly. I think maybe I need you more than I know. Those words, God, those words, I held on to them like a lifeline, played them over and over in my head during the bus ride back to Bangkok, during the quiet evenings in my apartment when she was busy with work. I need you. She needed me. It felt like purpose. It felt like love. On our last night in Korat before returning to Bangkok, we sat outside under a sky so full of stars it looked fake, like something from a movie or a postcard. The village was quiet except for the sound of insects, a constant chirping that had become familiar, almost soothing. Thanica was uncharacteristically silent, her head resting on my shoulder, her breathing slow and even. Are you all right? I asked after a while, my voice low so as not to disturb the peace. She nodded against my shoulder but didn't speak for a long moment. Then, so softly I almost missed it. My family have some problem, Mr. Colin. But it's okay. I will fix it. I felt my chest tighten. What kind of problem? I asked, pulling back slightly so I could see her face. She shook her head, not meeting my eyes. It's not your problem. I don't want to make you worry. You are guest here. You should be happy. But of course, that only made me worry more, made the concern bloom in my chest like something dark and insistent. Thanica, if something's wrong, you can tell me, I said, taking her hands in mine. Maybe I can help. You've done so much for me these past weeks. Please, let me do something for you. She looked up at me then, and even in the dim light from the house, I could see her eyes were shining with unshed tears. You already help so much, Mr. Colin. You make me feel not alone in Bangkok. You teach me, you listen to me, you come all the way here to meet my family. That is enough. That is more than enough. But I could see it wasn't enough. Not for her. Something was weighing on her, pressing down on her shoulders, and I hated the idea of her carrying it alone. Let me be the judge of what's enough, I said gently. What's wrong? What problem does your family have? For a moment, I thought she wouldn't tell me, thought she'd deflect or change the subject. But then she sighed, a sound full of exhaustion and defeat, and the story came out. It was nearly midnight by the time she finished telling me everything, both of us still sitting on the porch, the night air cool enough now that I'd draped my jacket over her shoulders. We'd moved back inside at some point, to the small table in the main room, and she'd made us tea that neither of us drank, the cups just sitting there between us growing cold. Her parents had already gone to bed, their quiet snores drifting through the thin walls. "My father borrowed money 3 years ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands wrapped around her teacup like she was trying to draw warmth from it. "The rice crop failed that year. Very bad drought, nothing grow, and he have no money to buy seed for next year. So he borrow from man in village, local money lender. Very high interest, but he have no choice. He think he can pay back next year when crop is good." I listened, my stomach sinking. But the next year, crop also fail. Too much rain that time, flood everything. And then he gets sick, have to go to hospital, and that costs money too. Now, the debt is very big, almost 500,000 baht. I did the math quickly in my head, converting the exchange rate. Almost 12,000 pounds. For them, an impossible sum. For me, a significant chunk of my savings, but not devastating. Not impossible. "And this man, the moneylender, he's asking for it back?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded, and a tear spilled down her cheek, tracking a dark line through the faint makeup she still wore. "He say if my father don't pay by end of next month, he will take the house. My parents will have nowhere to live. They are too old to find work, too old to start again." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she covered her face with her hands. "I try to help. I send money every month, as much as I can. But it's not enough. Bank salary is not so much. I don't know what to do, Mr. Colin. I am so scared. This is my fault. I should make more money. I should help them more." I reached across the table and gently pulled her hands away from her face. "Thanika, look at me. This is not your fault. You hear me? This is not your fault. You're already doing everything you can. You send them money. You visit when you can. You're a good daughter. The best daughter." She shook her head, more tears falling. "It's not enough. I am the oldest child. It's my duty to take care of them. If I cannot do this, what kind of daughter am I?" The desperation in her voice broke something in me. Here was this kind, hard-working woman who'd shown me nothing but patience and warmth, who'd welcomed me into her life and her family, and she was drowning in guilt and fear. And I had the means to help. It wasn't even a question, really. "How much time do they have?" I asked. She looked up, startled. "Maybe 2 months. But Mr. Colin, I don't tell you this because I want your help. I need to tell someone. I am carrying this alone for so long, and it's too heavy. I just need someone to know." But I was already doing calculations in my head. I'd sold my flat for 200,000 pounds, put most of it in savings, been living modestly off my pension. 12,000 pounds would hurt, would mean being more careful for the next few years, but I could afford it. I could do this. "What if I paid it off?" I said. The words came out before I could second-guess them. "What if I paid your father's debt?" Her face went white, then red, then white again. "No. No, Mr. Colin, I cannot let you do that. That is too much. That is not your responsibility." I leaned forward, taking her hands again, holding them tight. "Thanika, listen to me. I have the money. I'm living off my pension, which is more than enough for my needs here, and I have savings from selling my flat. 12,000 pounds isn't going to ruin me. It's going to help your family keep their home." She was shaking her head before I even finished. No, it's too much. You don't even know my family. We are nothing to you. Why would you do this?" The question hung there in the small room, and I knew I had to answer honestly. "You're not nothing to me," I said, my voice rough with emotion. You've given me more in these 2 months than I've had in 2 years. You've made me feel like I matter again, like I'm not just an old man waiting to die. You've given me friendship, purpose, connection. Let me do this. Please." She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, and then she threw her arms around my neck, sobbing into my shoulder. "You are too kind, Mr. Colin. Too kind. I don't deserve you. My family don't deserve you." I held her, feeling her body shake with sobs, and I thought, this is what love feels like. Not the passionate, all-consuming love of youth, but this, the quiet certainty that you'd do anything, sacrifice anything, to ease someone else's pain, to make their burden lighter. That night, lying on the thin mattress in the guest room, unable to sleep, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what I was doing. Was this foolish? Probably. Was I being used? Maybe. But even if I was, even if this all went wrong somehow, at least I'd have done something good. At least I'd have helped someone who needed it, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all that mattered. The transfer took 2 days to arrange, 2 days of bureaucracy and bank forms and international wire transfers that moved with agonizing slowness. I had to go back to Bangkok, spend hours in my bank's office explaining what I wanted to do, filling out paperwork, answering security questions. Thanika came with me, insisting she didn't want me to do it alone, though I suspected she was too anxious to stay in Korat, too afraid that I'd change my mind. "Are you sure about this?" She must have asked me a dozen times during those 2 days. "Really sure. You can say no, Mr. Colin. I will understand." But I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything in years. On the second afternoon, we sat in the cold, sterile office of my bank while a clerk in a crisp suit processed the final paperwork. The transfer would go directly to the moneylender's account. Thanika's father had provided all the details, and then it would be done. Finished. When the clerk finally nodded and said, "The transfer has been completed, Mr. Mercer," Thanika grabbed my arm so hard I felt her nails dig in through my shirt. "It's real?" she whispered, her face pale. "It's done?" I nodded. "It's done." She covered her face with her hands and cried right there in the bank lobby, her shoulders shaking, and I didn't care who was watching or what they thought. I put my arm around her and let her cry. That night, back in my apartment, she called her father. I sat on the bed and listened to her speak rapid Thai, her voice rising and falling with emotion, occasionally breaking into sobs. She must have talked for 20 minutes, maybe longer, before she finally hung up and looked at me with eyes so full of gratitude and disbelief it hurt to see. "He cannot believe it," she said, her voice hoarse. "He say he will go to temple every day and pray for you. He say you save his life, save our family. He is crying, Mr. Colin." I never hear my father cry before. I felt a swell of emotion so intense it was almost painful, a mix of pride and purpose and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was just the desperate need to be needed. Either way, it felt right. It felt like I'd done something meaningful, something that mattered. She came to me then, crossed the small room and knelt in front of where I sat on the bed, taking my face in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And then she kissed me. It was soft and tentative at first, unsure, but when I kissed her back, it deepened, became something more. We made love that night, slow and gentle and careful, and afterward she curled against me, her head on my chest, and whispered, "Now you are part of my family forever, Mr. Colin. Forever." I held her and believed her completely. God help me, I believed every word. We went back to Korat the following week to finalize everything, to make sure the debt was truly cleared and her father was free. The moneylender, a hard-faced man in his 50s with a gold watch and cold eyes, came to the house to confirm the payment. He counted through the paperwork, made some notes in a ledger, and nodded curtly before leaving. The moment he was out of sight, Thanika's mother burst into tears, clutching my hands and speaking so fast I couldn't catch a single word even if I'd understood Thai. Thanika translated, her own voice thick with emotion. She say you are angel sent from Buddha. She say she will pray for you every day for rest of her life. She say she don't know how to thank you. I felt embarrassed by the praise, overwhelmed by the intensity of their gratitude. I'm just glad I could help, I said, and I meant it. Her father shook my hand solemnly, his eyes wet, and said something long and formal that Thanika translated in pieces. He say, you are brother now. Family. His house is your house. Anything you need, any time, you ask. He say he will never forget what you do for him. That evening, they held a small ceremony in my honor. It wasn't planned, or maybe it was and they just hadn't told me. But suddenly neighbors were arriving, people I'd met during my first visit, and they were bringing food and drink. Someone set up a small table in the yard with candles and incense, and Thanika's mother brought out white string, the kind used in Buddhist blessings. One by one, people came forward and tied strings around my wrists, saying blessings in Thai that Thanika translated, for good luck, for long life, for happiness, for prosperity. By the end, both my wrists were covered in white strings, at least a dozen on each arm, and I felt absurdly emotional. This strange English man in a Thai village, being blessed by people who barely knew me, but accepted me completely. We ate and drank late into the night, her father pouring whiskey for anyone who would take it, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before Margaret got sick. I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of something larger than myself. That night, alone with Thanika on the porch again, the stars bright overhead and the sounds of the party dying down inside, she took my hand and said, you are my heart now, Mr. Colin. You know this? I looked at her, this beautiful woman who'd come into my life and changed everything, and I said, you're mine too. And I meant it. I meant it with everything I had. The first few weeks after we returned to Bangkok were the happiest I'd been in years. Thanika seemed different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was more affectionate, reaching for my hand in public without hesitation, kissing me goodbye at the BTS station without looking around to see who was watching. She started talking about the future in small, careful ways that made my heart soar. Maybe next year, we go to Chiang Mai together, she said one evening over dinner. I never go before, but I hear it's very beautiful. Or maybe we go to beach, Krabi or Phuket. You like beach, Mr. Colin? I did like the beach, though I hadn't been to one in years. I'd go anywhere with you, I told her honestly. She smiled, that soft, private smile I'd come to love. Good, because I want to go everywhere with you. I started making plans in my head, researching visa extensions and requirements for long-term stays in Thailand. I even began studying Thai in earnest, not just the basics but really trying to learn, using an app on my phone and practicing with Thanika every evening. Pom rak kun, I'd say, stumbling over the tones. Rak, meaning love. She'd laugh and correct me. Not like that. Say it like this, Rak. Up tone, then down. I'd repeat it until I got it right, and she'd clap like I'd accomplished something amazing. Very good, Mr. Colin. Now you sound almost Thai. Those evenings felt precious, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sex and everything to do with connection. We were building something together, I thought. A life, a future. I even started thinking about what it would mean to make this permanent, though the mechanics of it, marriage visas, legal requirements, scared me a little. But I was willing to figure it out if it meant being with her. But then, slowly at first, and then all at once, things started to change. It began with small things. She'd take longer to reply to my messages, hours instead of minutes. When I'd ask if she wanted to have dinner, she'd say she was tired or busy or had plans with friends from work. You don't mind, do you, Mr. Colin? She'd ask. I just need little time with my friends sometimes. Of course, I didn't mind. I didn't want to be that boyfriend, the clingy one who couldn't handle her having a life outside of me. But it hurt anyway. That small rejection, the growing sense that I was being kept at arm's length. When we did meet, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly, her mind clearly elsewhere. Is everything all right? I asked one night after she'd barely touched her food, her eyes distant. She blinked and focused on me, forcing a smile. Yes, of course. Sorry, Mr. Collin. Just very busy at work. New branch opening in 2 weeks. Very stressful. Many things to do. I accepted that explanation because I wanted to believe it. Banks were stressful. Branch openings required work. It made sense. But a voice in the back of my head, quiet but insistent, whispered that something was wrong. She started canceling plans more frequently. I have to work late tonight. I have headache. Maybe we meet tomorrow instead. My friend from university visit Bangkok. I should see her. You understand, right? I always said I understood. Always told her it was fine. Don't worry about it. But the space between us grew wider. The silences longer. And then the weekend trips to Korat started. I have to go home this weekend, she told me on a Thursday evening, her voice apologetic. My mother need help with something. I offered to come with her. After all, I was part of the family now, wasn't I? But she waved me off quickly. No, it's very boring. Just family stuff. Nothing interesting. You should stay here and rest. Enjoy Bangkok. The rejection stung more than it should have. Why didn't she want me there? What family stuff was so boring that I couldn't come? But I didn't push. I didn't want to seem needy or controlling. So I spent that weekend alone in my apartment, watching Thai television I barely understood, and trying not to feel abandoned. This pattern continued for 3 more weekends. Each time, she'd tell me she had to go to Korat for some vague family reason, and each time she'd discourage me from coming. Next time, she'd say, next time you come with me, I promise. But next time never came. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after I'd paid off the debt, I decided to surprise her at work. I'd been feeling the distance between us like a physical thing, a growing coldness I couldn't explain, and I thought maybe a spontaneous gesture would help, bring back some of the warmth we'd had. I bought flowers from a vendor near my apartment, cheerful yellow roses, her favorite color, and took the BTS to her bank branch. I felt nervous and slightly foolish, like a teenager trying to impress his girlfriend, but I didn't care. I missed her. I missed us. When I walked into the bank, the air conditioning hitting me like a cold wall after the heat outside, I looked around for her desk, but I didn't see her. I approached the receptionist, a young woman I'd seen before during my previous visits. Excuse me, I said in careful Thai, then switched to English when I saw her confused expression. Is Kun Thanika here today? I wanted to surprise her. The receptionist frowned slightly, checking something on her computer. Kun Thanika? She is not here today, sir. She take leave to visit family. My stomach dropped. Leave? She told me she was working late all week, that she was swamped with the new branch opening. Oh, I managed. I must have confused the days. Thank you. I left quickly, clutching the flowers, feeling foolish and confused and increasingly worried. Why had she lied? Where was she really? I tried calling her, but it went to voicemail. Hi, it's me. Just wanted to see how you're doing. Call me when you get a chance. I kept my voice light, casual, like I wasn't spiraling inside. She texted back 3 hours later. Sorry, very busy. Talk later. No explanation. No warmth. No acknowledgement that she'd lied about working. I sat in my apartment that evening, the roses wilting in a glass of water, and felt the first real stirrings of doubt. Not just concern or confusion, but actual doubt. Had I been played? Was this all a con? No, that couldn't be right. I'd met her family, seen their house, witnessed their genuine gratitude. But then why was she pulling away? What had changed? I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, running through every conversation, every interaction, looking for clues I'd missed. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was late, nearly midnight on a Tuesday, and I was half asleep when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A notification. A voice message from Thanika. I assumed she'd meant to call and left it by accident. So I listened, expecting to hear background noise or her fumbling to hang up, maybe some street sounds or music. Instead, I heard her laughing. It was a bright, carefree laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in weeks, maybe months. Then another voice, a woman speaking Thai, words I couldn't understand, but the tone was teasing, playful. Then more laughter. My chest tightened. I heard the word farang, foreigner, clear as anything. They were talking about foreigners. About me? The woman's voice said something else. A question maybe. And then Thanika's voice, clearer now, responded in Thai. I didn't understand the words, but something in her tone made me sit up in bed, suddenly wide awake. I played the message again and again. On the third listen, I caught more words. Ditang Prathet, foreigners, more laughter. Then Thanika's voice. And even though I didn't speak Thai well, I could hear the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty. I opened Google Translate with shaking hands and typed in the one phrase I'd managed to catch. Chan Mai Rock, Farang. Then another phrase, Mai Koe Rock. My screen showed the translation. I don't love foreigners. Never loved. The world tilted. The phone slipped from my hand onto the blanket, and I just sat there in the dark. My apartment suddenly feeling too small, the walls too close. I played the message again, this time listening for anything that might contradict what I'd heard, any context that might make it different, but there wasn't any. She was laughing with her friend about foreigners, about not loving them, and in that moment I understood with crystal clarity that she was talking about me. I was the foreigner. I was the one she'd never loved. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying that voice message maybe 20 times, maybe more, until I had every laugh memorized, every word burned into my brain. Each time I thought maybe I'd misheard, maybe the translation was wrong, maybe there was some context I was missing. But her laugh, God, her laugh was so light, so unburdened. She wasn't conflicted. She wasn't guilty. She was just done. I was done to her, finished, discarded. I thought about the money, the 480,000 baht I'd wired to clear her father's debt, and I felt physically sick. Not because I wanted it back. I'd never want that. The idea of demanding repayment felt beneath me, but because it meant I'd been a transaction, a means to an end. I'd thought I was saving her family, building a future, proving my love through action. But to her, I'd just been a foreigner with a bank account. Stupid, kind, disposable. The ceremony with the white strings, her mother calling me family, Thanika whispering, "You are my heart." All of it felt like theater now, carefully scripted moments designed to make me feel important, valued, necessary. And I'd fallen for every single one. By the time the sun came up, painting my apartment in weak gray light, I'd made a decision. I needed to see her. I needed to hear her say it to my face. I couldn't live with this uncertainty, this terrible knowledge that hung in the air like smoke. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an explanation. Or maybe I just needed to hear the truth from her own mouth before I could let go. I picked up my phone and texted her, my fingers surprisingly steady. "Can we talk? It's important." 3 hours passed before she replied. I spent those hours pacing my apartment, drinking coffee that tasted like ash, staring at my phone. Finally, at 9 in the morning, her response came. "Okay, I am in Korat with family. You can come if you want." Of course she was in Korat. Of course. I booked a bus ticket for that afternoon, my hands numb as I packed a small bag. I wasn't sure if I'd be coming back the same day or if I'd need to stay overnight, but I threw in an extra shirt and my toothbrush just in case. The ride felt endless. every kilometer stretching out like a year. I kept replaying that voice message, and then I'd replay all our good moments, trying to figure out where I'd missed the signs. Had she ever really cared? Or had it all been an act from the beginning? The idea that I'd been so thoroughly deceived, so completely blind, made me feel ancient and foolish. When the bus finally pulled into the Korat station, it was late afternoon, the heat still oppressive, the sun hanging low and angry in the hazy sky. I took a motorbike taxi to her family's house, the same route I'd taken months ago when everything had felt full of possibility. Now, it just felt like driving toward my own execution. She was sitting on the porch when I arrived, exactly where we'd sat on that last beautiful night before everything went wrong. She was wearing a simple cotton dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked calm, too calm, like she'd been expecting this. "Mr. Colin," she said, standing as I approached. "You come very fast." I dropped my bag on the ground and looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. Or maybe I was seeing her clearly for the first time. "Was anything real?" I asked. My voice came out hoarse, like I'd been screaming. She frowned slightly, a small crease appearing between her eyebrows. "What you mean, Mr. Colin?" "Of course things were real. We are friends. We have good time together. Friends." The word felt like a slap. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and played the voice message. I watched her face as she listened to herself laughing, heard her own words played back to her, and I saw it. Just for a second, just a flicker, something crossed her face. Panic, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by something smooth and carefully blank. "I don't understand," she said, her voice neutral. "That was just talking with friend, private conversation." "You should not listen to that," I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't sound like it came from me. "You said you don't love foreigners. You said you never do. Was I just convenient? Was I just a bank account to you?" Her jaw tightened, and she looked away. "You don't understand Thai culture, Mr. Colin. That is not exactly what I mean. Translation is not always correct." But her voice lacked conviction, and we both knew it. We both knew exactly what she'd meant. I sat down on the step, my legs suddenly unable to hold me up. I felt exhausted, hollowed out. "Why did you let me pay off your father's debt?" I asked quietly. She was silent for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. "Because I need help. My family need help. You offer. I don't force you, Mr. Colin. You choose to do this." She was right. I had chosen. She'd never put a gun to my head, never demanded anything. She'd just cried and told me about her family's problems, and I'd ridden in like a foolish knight trying to save the day. But it felt like the cruelest kind of technicality, like saying you didn't steal something when you'd just left the door open and waited for someone to hand it to you. "Did you ever care about me?" I asked, and my voice broke on the last word. "Even a little? Or was it all just acting?" She looked at me then, and her face softened slightly. Not much, but enough that I could see some genuine emotion underneath the mask. "You are good man, Mr. Colin," she said quietly. "You help my family. You are kind. You are patient. You teach me many things. I am grateful for this. But," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we are very different. You know this. You are from England. I am from Thailand. You are old. I am young. You have money. My family have nothing. These are just facts." I waited for her to say more, to say that despite all those differences, she'd cared anyway, but she didn't. The silence stretched out between us like a chasm. "I thought we were building something," I said finally. "I thought I was part of your family. You said I was. That night after I paid the debt, you said I was part of your family forever." She sighed, and for the first time I saw something like pity in her eyes, which somehow hurt worse than anything else. "You help my family, Mr. Colin. My parents are very grateful, but grateful is not same as family. You are outside, you will always be outside. This is not bad thing, just true thing. You cannot understand because you are not Thai. The words hit me like stones. You are outside. You will always be outside. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been naive to think that paying off a debt, that showing kindness, that any amount of effort could bridge the fundamental gap between us. Maybe I'd been trying to buy something that couldn't be bought. Belonging, love, a place in someone's life. What about all the time we spent together? I asked, hating how pathetic I sounded but unable to stop myself. The dinners, the walks, the weekends here with your family? Was any of it real? She shifted uncomfortably. It was nice. I enjoy spending time with you. You are interesting, different from Thai men. But Mr. Colin, I never say I love you. I never promise you future. You think these things, but I never say them. She was right again. She'd never said those words. I'd said them, or thought them, projected them onto every gesture and smile. But she'd never actually promised me anything. She'd just accepted what I offered and let me build castles in my head. So, what was I to you? I asked. Just someone to practice English with? Someone who could help your family and then disappear? Her face hardened slightly. That is not fair. I like you, Mr. Colin. But like is not love, and you want things I cannot give you. You want me to be something I am not. I realized then that I was crying, tears running down my face that I didn't bother to wipe away. I was 66 years old, sitting on a porch in rural Thailand, crying over a woman who'd never loved me. It would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. For caring too much? For expecting too much? For being foolish enough to think that money could buy affection? She softened, again slightly. Don't be sorry, Mr. Colin. You are a good person. You have kind heart. You will find someone who is right for you. But that person is not me. It was never me. The finality in her voice left no room for argument. This wasn't a fight we were having that could be resolved. This was her telling me, as gently as she could manage, that whatever I'd thought we had was over, had been over, maybe, before it even began. I stood up, my body feeling heavy and old in a way it never had before. I should go, I said. She nodded. Maybe that is best. I picked up my bag and turned to leave, but something made me stop. Does your family know? I asked. That you never cared about me? That I was just convenient? She looked away, toward the rice fields stretching out behind the house. They know you help us. They are grateful. What I feel or don't feel is not their business. So that was it. I'd saved their home, cleared their debt, been blessed by their neighbors, and I'd remain a memory, the generous foreigner who helped them once, a footnote, a story they'd tell occasionally with mild fondness and no real depth. I walked away without saying anything else. There was nothing left to say. I heard her call after me once, Mr. Colin, please don't be angry. You are a good man. But I didn't turn around. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was just broken. I made it halfway to the main road before I had to stop, sitting down on the edge of someone's property, my vision blurred with tears. An old woman came out of the house, took one look at me, and went back inside. She returned with a bottle of water and pressed it into my hands, saying something in Thai I didn't understand. I thanked her in broken Thai, Kop kun krap, and she patted my shoulder before shuffling away. Even in my grief, even in this moment of complete humiliation, a stranger showed me more kindness than the woman I'd fallen in love with. By the time I made it to the bus station, it was evening, and I'd missed the last bus back to Bangkok. I found a cheap guest house nearby, a room that smelled like mildew with a bed that sagged in the middle, and I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. I couldn't stop replaying her words. You are outside. You will always be outside. Was that true? Was I doomed to always be the foreigner, the outsider, no matter how hard I tried to belong? Or had I just chosen the wrong person, the wrong situation, and built a fantasy that was never real to begin with? I cried myself to sleep that night, something I hadn't done since Margaret died, and woke up the next morning feeling like I'd aged a decade overnight. The bus ride back to Bangkok the next day was surreal. I sat by the window, watching the countryside roll past, rice fields giving way to suburban sprawl, and I felt completely numb. I kept checking my phone, part of me expecting a message from Thanika, maybe an apology or an explanation or even just a goodbye, but there was nothing. Silence. When I finally made it back to my apartment in Sukhumvit, it felt foreign too, like it belonged to a different person. The Colin who'd left 2 days ago had been hurt but hopeful, looking for answers. The Colin who returned was just empty. I spent the first few days in a haze. I barely ate, couldn't sleep properly, just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment, every conversation, looking for the point where I could have seen this coming. There were signs. Of course there were. The way she'd never actually said she loved me. The way she'd discouraged me from coming to Korat after I'd paid the debt. The distance that had grown between us in those final weeks. But I'd been so desperate to believe in what we had, so hungry for connection, that I'd ignored them all. One morning, maybe 4 or 5 days after I got back, I was sitting on my bed, unshaven and probably smelling terrible, when I realized I had 2 choices. I could let this destroy me, could retreat into bitterness and isolation and spend whatever years I had left regretting everything. Or I could try to learn from it, try to understand what had happened and why, and maybe find a way to move forward. It wasn't a dramatic realization, no lightning bolt moment, just a quiet acknowledgement that staying in this apartment feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to change anything. So I got up, showered for the first time in days, shaved, put on clean clothes, and I went outside. The weeks that followed were among the hardest of my life. Harder in some ways than losing Margaret, because at least with her death I could be angry at cancer, at fate, at God. But this was entirely my own doing. I'd walked into this situation with my eyes wide open, making choices no one forced on me, and I had no one to blame but myself. I moved out of my apartment in Sukhumvit, couldn't stand being in the same neighborhood where Thanika and I had spent so much time. I found a cheap guest house in a quieter part of the city, near a small temple I'd never visited before, a place where no one knew me, and I didn't have to explain why I looked like I'd aged 10 years overnight. The room was basic, just a bed and a fan and a small desk by the window, but it was enough. I started walking a lot during those weeks, just aimlessly wandering the city for hours, letting Bangkok swallow me up in its noise and chaos. I avoided the places we'd been together, the cafes and restaurants and parks, couldn't stand the memories. Instead, I walked through neighborhoods I'd never explored, watched families eating dinner at street-side restaurants, observed the rhythm of daily life that continued regardless of my personal devastation. I started visiting temples, not because I'd suddenly found religion, but because they were quiet places where no one bothered me. I'd sit in front of the altars, watching people pray, burning incense and making offerings, and I'd think about what Thanika had said. You are outside. You will always be outside. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been naive to think I could ever truly belong here, in this culture I didn't understand, speaking a language I could barely grasp. But then I'd watch the people around me, Thai and foreign alike, all looking for meaning or peace or forgiveness, and I'd think maybe everyone was outside in their own way. Maybe that feeling of being lost and disconnected wasn't unique to me, wasn't just about being a foreigner in Thailand. Maybe it was just part of being human, especially when you're alone. One evening, sitting in my guest house room as the sun set and the traffic sounds rose from the street below, I took out a piece of paper and wrote a letter. It was addressed to Thanika, though I knew even as I wrote it that I'd never send it. But I needed to get the words out, needed to say everything I hadn't been able to say on that porch in Korat. Dear Thanika, I wrote, I don't know if I'm writing, in this because I'm angry or because I'm hurt or because I still don't understand what happened between us. Maybe all three. I want you to know that I don't regret paying off your father's debt. I know that might sound strange, but it's true. That money came from a place of genuine care, and even though I know now that you didn't feel the same way about me, I can't regret trying to help someone who needed it. The mistake wasn't the money. The mistake was thinking that money could buy something it can't. I thought if I helped your family, if I proved how much I cared through actions, that somehow you'd see me as more than just a lonely old farang, that you'd see me as someone worth loving. But you can't purchase a place in someone's heart, no matter how much you give. I understand that now, too late maybe, but I understand it. What hurts the most isn't the money or even the rejection. It's the feeling that I was never real to you, that while I was falling in love, you were just waiting for me to be useful. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe you did care about me in your own way, just not in the way I needed you to. Maybe the problem was that I wanted too much, expected too much, from someone who'd never promised me anything. You were right when you said you never told me you loved me. You never made me any promises. I built this whole future in my head based on nothing but my own desperate need for connection. And that's not your fault. That's mine. I don't know if you'll ever read this letter. Probably not, since I don't think I'll ever send it. But writing it helps somehow, gets all these thoughts out of my head where they've been circling like vultures. I hope you're happy, Thanika. I hope your family is doing well, that your father's rice crop succeeds, that your mother stays healthy. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, whatever that is. As for me, I'm learning to live with what happened, learning to forgive myself for being naive, for being lonely enough to mistake kindness for love. It's hard, some days harder than others, but I'm trying, and maybe that's all any of us can do. Try, and sometimes fail, and then try again. Take care of yourself, Colin. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the desk drawer in my room, and I didn't look at it again for months. But writing it helped, gave me some sense of closure even if it was one-sided. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild some semblance of a life. I enrolled in a proper Thai language course, not because I thought it would help me connect with anyone romantically, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could learn something difficult, that I wasn't completely useless. The classes were held 3 times a week in a small school near my guest house, and I was by far the oldest student. Most of my classmates were in their 20s or 30s, young professionals or digital nomads, and they looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. But I didn't care. I focused on learning the tones, the script, the grammar that seemed designed to confuse foreigners. It was hard, frustrating work, and there were days I wanted to quit, but I kept at it. I started volunteering at a local school, teaching English to kids who couldn't afford private lessons. Someone at my language class had mentioned the program, and I figured why not? I had the experience and I had the time. The school was in a poor neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place tourists never see, with narrow alleys and houses built practically on top of each other. The kids were wonderful, excited, and eager to learn, and they didn't care that I was old or foreign or carrying around a broken heart. They just wanted to learn the difference between he and she, wanted to practice their pronunciation of th sounds, wanted to know what England was like, and if it really rained all the time. Teaching them became the highlight of my week, these few hours, where I felt genuinely useful, where my presence actually mattered. I made a few friends during this time, other expats mostly, people who'd come to Thailand for their own complicated reasons and were content to live quietly on the margins of society. We'd meet for coffee or dinner occasionally, usually at cheap local restaurants where we could sit for hours without being rushed, and we'd talk about everything except why we were here. It was an unspoken rule, this mutual agreement not to pry into each other's pasts or motivations. We were all running from something. We all had wounds we didn't want to expose, and there was comfort in that shared understanding. One of them, a former accountant from Australia named Michael, became something like a real friend. He'd been in Bangkok for almost a decade, spoke Thai fluently, and had a Thai girlfriend he was carefully non-committal about. Never marry them, he told me one night over beers. The moment you do, everything changes. You become a resource, not a person. I wondered if he knew my story somehow, if he'd sensed what had happened to me. But I didn't ask, and he didn't pry. I never heard from Thanika again after that last conversation in Korat. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reach out. I'd deleted her number from my phone the day after I got back to Bangkok, blocked her on the few social media accounts I had, removed every trace of her from my devices and my life. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about her. I thought about her constantly, especially in those first few months. I'd walk past the ATM where we'd first met and feel my chest tighten. I'd hear someone laugh in a certain way, light and carefree, and I'd turn around expecting to see her. I'd wake up from dreams where we were still together, still happy, and the realization that it wasn't real would hit me all over again. I thought about her family too, wondered if her father had kept the house, if her mother still cooked those elaborate meals for guests, if they ever thought about the foreign man who'd saved them. I doubted it. Time passes, memories fade, and I was probably just a story they told occasionally. Do you remember that English teacher? The tall one who paid off our debt? Such a kind man. And then they'd move on to talking about something else, because I was never central to their story. Just a brief character who appeared, served a purpose, and exited stage left. That realization hurt more than I expected. I'd wanted to matter, wanted to be unforgettable, wanted my generosity to mean something permanent. But the world doesn't work that way. People move on, life continues, and your grand gestures become footnotes in someone else's narrative. Around 6 months after everything fell apart, I was cleaning out my desk drawer and found the letter I'd written to Thanika. I read it again, and I was struck by how raw it still felt, how the hurt hadn't fully healed even after half a year. But I was also struck by something else, a kind of resignation maybe, or acceptance. I had been naive. I had projected my loneliness and need onto someone who'd never asked for that burden. And while that didn't excuse Thanika's part in it, her careful manipulation of my emotions and her willingness to accept my money while never quite lying but never quite telling the truth either, it did mean I had to take responsibility for my own choices. I'd seen what I wanted to see, ignored the warning signs, and convinced myself that love could be earned through grand gestures. That was on me. I added a postscript to the letter that day. 6 months later, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, and not because I think you deserve forgiveness, but because holding on to this anger is killing me, and I've already lost enough. I forgive you so I can move on, so I can be free. I put the letter back in the drawer, and this time I left it there without the weight I'd been carrying. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. It's been 3 years now since I paid off that debt. 3 years since I sat on a porch in Korat and heard the words, "You are outside. You will always be outside." I'm 69 years old now, still living in Bangkok, still trying to figure out what the rest of my life is supposed to look like. I've learned a lot about myself in that time, lessons I wish I'd learned earlier but am grateful to have learned at all. I've learned that kindness isn't the same as love, that you can be generous and helpful and caring, and none of that means the other person owes you affection or commitment. I've learned that generosity isn't the same as connection, that throwing money at a problem, even from the most genuine place, doesn't build real relationships. It just creates debt, financial or emotional, and debt isn't the same as love. I've learned that you can do the right thing for the wrong reasons, that my desire to help Thanika's family came partially from genuine compassion but also from my desperate need to feel important, to matter to someone. And when your motivations are mixed like that, when you're giving not just to help but to fulfill your own emptiness, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Most importantly, I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting. You don't just move on from heartbreak like it never happened. The scars remain, the memories persist, and there are still days when I wake up and think about Thanika about what might have been different if I'd been younger or Thai, or if I'd understood the cultural gap between us. But healing is about accepting that some things can't be undone, that some people can't be saved, especially when they never asked you to save them in the first place. It's about making peace with your mistakes and trying to do better next time. My life now is quiet but not unhappy. I still live in that guest house room, though it feels more like home than the apartment in Sukhumvit ever did. I've decorated it with small things, books I've collected from secondhand shops, a plant my language teacher gave me that somehow hasn't died despite my neglect, a few photos of Emma and my grandchildren that she sends regularly. I wake early most mornings, still on something like British time despite years in Thailand, and I walk to a nearby cafe for coffee. Then I usually spend a few hours studying Thai. I'm much better now, can hold conversations and read simple texts, or preparing for my volunteer teaching sessions. Twice a week, I teach English to those kids, and it remains the most meaningful part of my week. Some afternoons, I meet Michael or one of my other expat friends for lunch. We sit in the same cheap restaurants, eating the same dishes we've had 100 times, and we talk about nothing important. Football scores, visa requirements, the best place to get your shirts tailored, surface-level stuff that doesn't demand vulnerability. But there's comfort in it, in these shallow friendships that don't ask for more than I can give. Evenings, I usually read or watch something on my laptop. I've been working my way through classic films I never had time to watch when I was teaching, Kurosawa and Bergman and Truffaut. Sometimes I write in a journal I started keeping about 6 months after the Thanika situation ended. Nothing profound, just observations about daily life, thoughts that I want to get out of my head. It helps. This routine, it's not exciting or romantic or particularly meaningful, but it's mine, and it's enough. I went back to Korat once, about a year ago, not to see Thanika or her family, but because I'd heard about a famous temple in the area and wanted to see it. I took a bus there on a Saturday morning, and as we got closer to the city, I felt my stomach tighten with anxiety. What if I ran into her? What would I say? But I didn't run into her. Korat is a big city, and the chances of randomly encountering someone are slim. I visited the temple, spent a few hours walking around the old city center, and then caught the evening bus back to Bangkok. The whole trip felt anticlimactic, like I'd been bracing for some big emotional moment that never came. But maybe that was its own kind of closure, the realization that the place held no power over me anymore, that it was just a city like any other, full of people living their lives completely unaware of my little personal drama. I still think about that night sometimes, the voice message that changed everything. I think about Thanika's laugh, so light and careless, and I wonder if she ever thinks about me. Probably not. Or if she does, it's probably with a vague sense of guilt mixed with justification. She needed help. I offered it, and she took it. From her perspective, she probably didn't do anything wrong. She never lied, not technically. She just let me believe what I wanted to believe. And in the end, maybe that's the real lesson here. People will take what you offer, especially when they're desperate or scared or seeing a way out of an impossible situation. It's up to you to be smart about what you offer and why. To make sure you're giving from a place of genuine generosity rather than from a need to be needed, to be loved, to matter. I failed that test spectacularly, but I'm trying to do better now. When I volunteer at the school, I'm careful not to get too attached to any one student, not to start projecting significance onto their gratitude. When I make new friends, I try to keep things balanced, reciprocal, so I'm not always the one giving, and they're not always the one taking. It's hard, this new awareness, this constant self-monitoring. Part of me misses the naive Colin who could just love freely without worrying about whether he was being used. But that Colin also got his heart broken and lost a chunk of his savings and ended up sitting alone in a guest house room wondering where it all went wrong. So maybe this more cautious version is better, even if it's lonelier. A few months ago, I was sitting on a train heading north to Chiang Mai. I'd decided on a whim to take a short trip, see a different part of the country, maybe find some cooler weather in the mountains. The train was old and slow, swaying gently as it moved through the countryside, and I sat by the window watching rice fields roll past under a pale blue sky. It was a view I'd seen before, the same landscape I'd passed through on those bus rides to Korat, but this time it didn't hurt to look at. I found myself thinking about that house again, the one with the leaking roof that I'd helped repair. I thought about the porch where Thanika and I had sat under the stars, where she'd told me I was part of her family forever, where she'd later told me I was outside and always would be. And I realized something sitting there on that train, something that maybe should have been obvious but took me 3 years to fully understand. I didn't regret paying off the debt, not really. It was a foolish thing to do, reckless even, giving that much money to people I barely knew based on a relationship that was barely 2 months old. But it came from a place of genuine care, even if that care was mixed with my own neediness and loneliness. I saw people I cared about in pain, and I had the means to help them, so I did. The mistake wasn't the money itself. The mistake was thinking that money could buy something it can't: belonging, love, permanence, family. You can't purchase a place in someone's heart, no matter how much you give, no matter how generous or selfless you try to be. Either they want you there or they don't, and no amount of grand gestures will change that fundamental reality. Thanika didn't want me there. Not really. Maybe she thought she did for a while, or maybe she was always just going through the motions, saying what needed to be said to keep me invested. I'll never know for sure, and I've made peace with that uncertainty. What matters is that I learned the lesson, however painfully, that I'm still here, still trying, still capable of connection even if I'm more careful about it now. The train rumbled on, and I watched a farmer working in his field, bent over rice paddies with water up to his knees. I thought about Thanika's father, wondered if he was out there somewhere doing the same work, his debt paid and his house secure. I hoped he was happy, hoped the crops had been good in the years since I'd left, hoped he and his wife were healthy and comfortable. I bore them no ill will, these people who'd welcomed me briefly into their lives and then forgotten me. They'd been desperate, I'd been available, and we'd all played our parts in a little drama that meant everything to me and very little to them. That's just how life works sometimes. Not everyone who touches your life will be changed by you, even if you're changed by them. I'm still in Bangkok, still teaching those kids twice a week, still studying Thai and meeting friends for cheap lunches and watching old films in my guest house room. It's not the life I imagined when I left Bristol, but then again, I'm not sure what I imagined. Maybe I thought Thailand would magically heal me, that the warm weather and the cheap cost of living and the famous Thai friendliness would somehow fill the void that Margaret's death had left. But grief doesn't work like that. Doesn't just evaporate because you change locations. You carry it with you wherever you go, and eventually you have to sit with it, make peace with it, integrate it into who you are. I've done that now, mostly. I think about Margaret often, but the memories don't hurt the way they used to. I can remember our good years without the pain of the end overwhelming everything else. I can see our life together for what it was, something real and valuable that ended too soon, but something I was lucky to have at all. And I think about Thanika too, though less frequently now and with less bitterness. She was young and desperate, and doing what she thought she needed to do to help her family. Was it right? No. Was it kind? No. But I understand it better now than I did in the immediate aftermath. Desperation makes people do ugly things, makes them rationalize behaviors they'd never normally consider. She saw an opportunity in a lonely old foreigner with money and feelings, and she took it. I can't change that. Can't rewrite history to make myself less gullible or her less calculating. All I can do is accept what happened and try to carry forward with whatever wisdom I managed to extract from the experience. If I could go back and talk to the Colin from 3 years ago, the one standing at that ATM in Bangkok, fumbling with his card and feeling grateful when a pretty young woman offered to help, I don't know what I'd say. Maybe I'd warn him. Maybe I'd tell him to be more careful, to guard his heart, to ask more questions before diving in head first. But then again, maybe I wouldn't. Because as much as it hurt, as much as I lost, I also gained something valuable. I learned that I'm capable of love, even after loss. That my heart didn't die with Margaret. That I can still feel connection and desire and hope. I learned that I'm strong enough to survive betrayal, to pick myself up after being knocked down and build something new from the wreckage. And I learned that the worst thing you can do isn't to trust the wrong person. It's to stop trusting altogether, to let one bad experience turn you bitter and closed off, unable to connect with anyone ever again. So here I am, almost 70 years old, still searching for something I can't quite name in a country that will never fully be home. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being outside isn't the tragedy Thanika made it sound like. Maybe it's just a different way of living, belonging to yourself rather than to a place or a person or a culture. I still smile at people on the street, still try to speak Thai even when I know my tones are wrong, still volunteer at that school and watch kids' faces light up when they finally understand a difficult concept. I still have coffee with Michael and my other expat friends, still take long walks through neighborhoods I don't know, still sit in temples sometimes and think about life and loss and everything in between. Some days I'm happy, genuinely content with this small, quiet life I've built. Other days I'm lonely, aching for connection in a way that feels like hunger. But both of those feelings are okay. Both are part of being human, and I'm learning to accept them without judgment. I paid off a family's debt because I thought it would make me part of their world. It didn't, but it taught me something more valuable than belonging. It taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or saving people or proving your worth through sacrifice. It's about showing up honestly, being genuine in your intentions, and accepting that sometimes, no matter how much you give, it won't be enough for the other person. And that's okay, because the measure of a person isn't what they receive in return for their generosity. It's what they're willing to offer anyway, even when there's no guarantee it will be returned, even when they know they might get hurt. I gave everything I had to Thanika and her family, and it wasn't enough for her. She wanted something I couldn't be, or maybe she never wanted me at all, but it was enough for me. I acted out of genuine care, however misguided, and I helped people who needed helping. That counts for something, even if it didn't get me what I wanted. Even if it left me alone in a guest house room in Bangkok, piecing my life back together one day at a time. Maybe that's the only closure I'll ever need, the understanding that I did my best with what I knew at the time, that I'm capable of love and generosity and sacrifice, even if those qualities don't always protect me from pain, that I'm still here, still trying, still open to whatever comes next. Some days, that feels like enough. Some days, it feels like everything. And on the days when it doesn't, when the loneliness feels like too much and I wonder what the point of any of this is, I remind myself of what I learned. That healing is a process, not a destination. That you can survive heartbreak and come out the other side, different maybe, scarred certainly, but still intact, still yourself, still worthy of love, even if you haven't found it yet. I'm outside, just like Thanika said. Maybe I always will be. But I'm learning that outside isn't the worst place to be. At least out here, you can see things clearly. You're not caught up in the illusions of belonging, not pretending to be something you're not just to fit in. You're just yourself, alone maybe, but free. And some days, that freedom feels like grace.